My name is Jim Moriarty, and I'm a graduate of Lowell High School, class of 1973. I'm also chairman of the Lowell High School Distinguished Alumni Board of Directors. It is my pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon for the 17th annual ceremony of Distinguished Alumni of Lowell High School. Today's event is to recognize 5 individuals who graduated from Lowell High School and went on to do some extraordinary things. Over the years, we've recognized alum who have excelled in a variety of fields, ranging from medicine to business. We've also recognized alumni who have reached the pinnacle in their fields of law, government, education, and humanities. This year's class of Lowell High School Distinguished Alumni are no different. We have leaders in business, philanthropy, education, medicine, and government. Each individual has excelled in his or her field, and though their profession paths may be different, what they all have in common is they all started their journeys here in the halls of Lowell High School. Part of the foundation that led to their success was built on what they learned here from their relationships with their teachers, their coaches, their fellow students here at Lowell High. We hope you find their stories inspirational and meaningful as you continue your own journey here at Lowell High. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce this year's honoree. From the class of 1863, Helen Whittier, represented by Martha Mayo. From the class of 1910, Dr. James Rodger, represented by his grandson, Douglas Anderson. From the class of 1949, Dr. Titus Plomaritus. From the class of 1956, Dorothy LeRiche Keville. And from the class of 1974, Stephen Conant. Now please join me in giving our honorees a round of applause. I ask everybody to please rise for the posting of the colors by our Air Force Junior ROTC cadets and remain standing for the singing of a national anthem by the Lowell High School Choir.
Oh, What an honor it is to be here today to give recognition to our distinguished alumni. And before I ask them to take their seats in the front row, I would just like you all to give them another round of applause, please. You may all have a seat in the front row. Distinguished alumni, you can go back to your original seats. Thank you. More from them in a few minutes, and that's why we're here today. And also, before we begin, I'd like to recognize a few dignitaries and school officials that are here today. I'd like to recognize Jackie Dorothy from the Lowell School Committee. Dr. Joel Boyd, Superintendent of Schools. And Robin Desmond, Chief Academic Officer, Lowell Public Schools. As someone who has not grown up in Lowell, I'm not from Lowell, I'm not a Lowell High School alumni, I've kept an eye on Lowell from a distance when I was growing up in Lawrence and always had fond memories of Lawrence High football team trying to beat Lowell over the years. And if you're a Lowell High graduate or you've been at Lowell High since school began, there was always that rivalry between Lawrence and Lowell. And that remains special to me. Also, as a basketball player at Lawrence High, I used to come to Lowell High and face some tough competition. It was always great, but the folks here at Lowell always treated me well. And now I feel like I am now part of the Lowell High School and Lowell community, and I'm so proud to be here. But one of the things that I'm learning is that there's a deep, deep tradition of pride, of giving back, of paying it forward from our alumni. And I cannot be more thankful to have the alumni and distinguished alumni and folks that are organizing this from the community to provide this opportunity, not only for the alumni to receive these awards, these distinguished alumni, but for the students in this auditorium today to see the power behind the work that you've done. The young people that are here today are our senior class elected officials. They are a student advisory council who make up one representative for every advisory homeroom in the whole school, and they're working with me to help make Lowell High School one of the best schools in the state, if not the best school in the state. Our JROTC is at every single event. I have not been to an event and not seen our JROTC. And I want to thank you and thank your battalion commanders for all the work you've done with community service and giving back to our community and being an example and a role model for our students. Thank you, JROTC. You saw the great performance from our show choir under the direction of Michael Winslow. Again, an outstanding group at many, many events, sweating in those hut outfits. I'm sure you guys are hot over there, but you're representing us extremely well, and we thank you for being here today. Could you please give it up for the show choir? Do we have members of the National Honor Society here? NHS, raise your hand. So look behind you, everyone. These are all of our keep your hands up. These are our National Honor Society students from Lowell High School who are many of them were inducted on Tuesday night into the National Honor Society. I think it's about over 200 students who have led with character, service, leadership and integrity, and academic ability. Give a shout out to our National Honor Society students. So with that, I would just like to say thank you for allowing me humbly to open up the ceremony and get this program started. Thank you to all of the organizers of this event. And most importantly, congratulations to the distinguished alumni from Lowell High School. Thank you very much. I'd like to bring back Mr. James Moriarty for the introduction of inductees. Oh, video. I apologize. We are going to see a brief video, and after the video, we will continue with the ceremony.
On December 26, 1831, Lowell High School opened its doors to Lowell's first students. 190 years later, Lowell High School continues on as the first coeducational and racially integrated high school in the United States. Today, Lowell High School is proud to recognize 5 more of its most distinguished alumni. From the class of 1863, Helen Augusta Whittier. From the class of 1910, James Rodger. From the class of 1949, Titus Plomaritus. From the class of 1956, Dorothy LeRiche Keville. From the class of 1974, Stephen Conant. Each has traveled a very different road in life, and each has a distinctive definition of success. However, there is a common thread in the success of these outstanding people. Each attended and graduated from Lowell High School. Lowell High School moved its present location in 1840 and consisted of just 10 rooms and a large assembly hall. Soon after, Carolyn von Vonker became the first African American to graduate from a public high school in the United States. In 1859, James Carney of the Lowell Institution for Savings established the Carney Medal Awards. This honor recognized the top 3 male and top 3 female graduates for excellence in character, scholarship, and attendance. These awards are presented annually to Lowell's most deserving students. Lowell High remains as the bedrock for a long list of distinguished scholars, artists, public servants, and athletes. This 2021 class of distinguished alumni carries on the tradition of excellence achieved by the previous 16 classes of inductees. Today, Lowell High School preserves the tradition of excellence begun in 1831 by recruiting the finest teachers while integrating cutting-edge technology into the lives of today's learners. For all our students, much like tonight's honorees, the journey towards distinction and success begins here at Lowell High School.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Martin, and I'm a graduate of Lowell High School from the class of 1968. Before I introduce the students who will introduce our honorees, I wanted to recognize some past honorees that have taken the time and come back to Lowell High School for today's event. First, from the class of 1945, George Simonian. George, you stand up. George was an educator, the principal of Chelmsford High School for many years, and then the superintendent of schools in the town of Chelmsford. He had a wonderful career. Next, from the class of 1956, Lowell's own artist. She has painted and sketched every single building in this community for years and years, and she is just an outstanding person. From the class of 56, Janet Lambert Moore. Next, former honoree is Jim Campbell from the class of 1962. Jim was the city manager in Lowell and worked for the governor in Massachusetts, and he currently is the chairman of the Middlesex Community College Trustees. So we're happy to have you here, Jim. Thank you for coming back. To introduce our first honoree, Morgan Bilodeau. Morgan is a member of the National Honor Society, captain of the girls' varsity cross-country team, and president of the Pep Club. She is also a member of the indoor and outdoor track teams. Please welcome Morgan.
Helen Augusta Whittier, class of 1863. Born in Lowell in 1846, Helen was the only daughter of Moses and Lucinda Whittier to survive into adulthood. After graduating Lowell High School in 1863, she went on to LaSalle Seminary, graduating in 1867. At the age of 23, Helen teamed up with several other Lowell women to found the Dickens Club, a literary society named after Charles Dickens, who visited Lowell in 1942. In 1878, she was a founding member of the Lowell Art Association. In 1888, she became heavily involved in the family business, the Whittier Cotton Mill. When her brother became ill with Bright's disease, dying in September of that year, Helen assumed control of the Whittier Cotton Mill on Stackpole Street since there was no male heir to take over the business. Over the course of the next 15 years, Helen served as president and treasurer of the company, the only woman in the 19th century to run a large textile company. She presided over the operation of the Lowell Mill in the 1890s. Throughout her life, Helen was active in local, statewide, and national education, arts, cultural, and health organizations, including president of Lowell General Hospital Association and founding member of the Channing Fraternity. From 1918 to 1921, Helen returned to teaching as an instructor of history of art in Boston. She died in 1925. Please welcome to this podium Martha Mayo.
Hello, everybody. My name is Martha Mayo. I am not Helen Whittier. I did not graduate in 1863. I'd like to thank the young woman, Morgan, who just made the presentation. It was really nice. And I'd also like to thank the committee that presented Helen with this award. And I'm very happy to receive it on her behalf. Morgan did such a nice job. What I thought I would do is talk a little bit about what Lowell High School was like in the early 1860s when Helen was a student. As was mentioned in the film, the first Lowell High School was first established in 1831. And then in 1840, they moved from a building that they had on Appleton Street to where the oldest building is located now, but it was built, red brick building, about 3.5 stories high, rough, steep pitched roofs, 2 big chimneys, and its front doors were actually on Ann Street, which is now where Lucy Locker Parkway, but it was a broad street, just like Kirk Street. The Kirk Street side was the back door, and so all the students would come in from Ann Street. There were 2 doors. The male students would go in one door, the female students would go in the other door. So although the high school was one structure for students, both men and women, the classes were separate, and they had female teachers teaching the women and male teachers teaching the male students. And this area was when the high school was built, it was a really residential area, much like parts of Belvedere and Pawtuckaville. There were these elegant houses that were along Ann Street and also along Church Street with these large elm trees that cast shadows and kept the areas cool. When Helen entered school in 1859, the city itself had about 37,000 people, 15,000 textile workers, 10,000 were women, 5,000 were men. So it was a very strong women-dominated city. And in her first year, the high school had about 319 students. There were 134 male students and 185 women students. A few years later, in 1863, she graduated in 1862 as a Connie Medal winner, but then in 1863, she continued to take classes, so she didn't actually leave Lowell High School until 1863. And during that period was a tumultuous period for Lowell. The Civil War broke out. Thousands and thousands of young men from Lowell joined and entered into the Civil War. The cotton mills couldn't get enough cotton, so many of them closed or reduced production significantly, and laid off thousands of female employees, and many of them went back to their hometowns in Maine and Vermont and New Hampshire. And the male students, or the male textile workers, most of them had enlisted in the service. When these dramatic things happen to a city or an area, oftentimes women are able to take advantage of those dramatic situations, and they gain skills and develop skills that they may not have been able to develop otherwise. And Clearly, Helen became a very talented artist and educator, but she also had real strong leadership skills. And I think it's those skills that she developed during this period in the early 1860s that led her to be such a strong advocate for the arts and education and women's rights. Thank you all very much.
To introduce our next honoree, Christopher Ferrier. Christopher is the senior class senator, vice president of the National Honor Society, and the treasurer of the Model United Nations. Please welcome Christopher.
Dr. James Y. Rodger, class of 1910. Born and raised in Lowell, Dr. James Rodger was the 11th child born to Thomas and Catherine Rodger. When he was 5 years old, his father died of pneumonia, leaving his mother to raise James and his siblings. In his senior year at Lowell High School, James was manager of the boys' basketball team and a member of the Lowell Glee Club. In 1914, James would become Dr. Rodger after graduating from Boston University Medical School. He immediately came back to Lowell to serve its residents until he enlisted in the National Guard in April 1917 to serve in World War I. Dr. Rodger served on the front line in France, performing surgery for up to 21 hours per day. He was present near Rheims on May 6, 1918, when German aviators bombed Red Cross tents. He was injured in the bombing and spent 3 months in the hospital. In February 1919, Dr. Rodger was made City of Lowell bacteriologist, serving until April 1958. He also served on the Board of Health. Dr. Rodger was affiliated with Lowell General Hospital for nearly 50 years and St. Joseph's Hospital for 25 years. Dr. Rodger was a member and founding fellow of the American College of Pathologists, a member and president of the Middlesex North Medical Society, and president of the Massachusetts Medical Society. Dr. Rodger was married for over 55 years to Irene Walsh and has 3 children and 8 grandchildren. Please welcome to the podium his grandson, Douglas Anderson.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Doug Anderson, and I'm proudly representing the Rodger family today as we honor my grandfather, Dr. James Y. Rodger. I would like to thank the board for this prestigious honor. I've been trying for a while, and now my persistence has paid off. The Rodger family came from Paisley, Scotland, and settled in New York in 1876. 6 years later, they came to Lowell. On April 18, 1888, James was born. He was the 11th child born to Thomas and Catherine Rodger. When James was 5, his father, a loom fixer and church elder, died of pneumonia, leaving his mother to raise her children. At one point in his young life, according to letters that I have, he fell in with the wrong group of friends and took to smoking and doing other things he ought not. Once he got involved with the First Baptist Church, he turned things around and became a good student. He graduated from Lowell High in 1910, where he was baseball team manager and sang second tenor on stage at the Lowell Opera House the night of graduation. 219 students graduated that night. Mayor John Meehan gave a speech and urged the graduates, and this is as relevant today as it was in 1910, be kind in speech and in deeds. He told them to raise like true heroes and heroines, superior to your circumstances and surroundings. Lastly, he told them, love labor, for labor is the great law of life. Young James would already follow that advice. He had already become superior to his circumstances and his surroundings. In 1914, he would become Dr. James Y. Rodger after graduating from Boston University School of Medicine. He immediately came back to Lowell and Lowell General Hospital, where he would begin his internship and start serving the city and its residents. His medical service was interrupted by World War I. Putting his career on hold, he enlisted on April 9, 1917, just 3 days after the U.S. entered the war. He received his commission and now would become First Lieutenant James Y. Rodger, M.D., in the Medical Corps of the 26th Yankee Division. He was sent to France, somewhere near the front lines, and assigned to the 103rd Field Hospital. He served in the Toul sector and was present at the Battle of Seicheprey, where it was not uncommon for him to perform surgery up to 21 hours per day. Labor for him had become the law of the land. Many lives were lost, but many were saved thanks to improved methods of surgery learned on the battlefield. In December of 1917, in a letter to the Lowell Courier-Citizen, he wrote that if I have got to sacrifice myself on the altar of liberty and justice, I want it to be a clean sacrifice, and there are a great many more who feel the same way. Then on May 6, 1918, First Lieutenant Rodger was near Reims when German aviators bombed the Red Cross tents. He was severely injured in the bombings and spent 3 months in a hospital. After returning to the States, he helped train medical personnel on what to expect on the front lines. He had risen to become a true hero. He was awarded the World War I Victory Medal with Defensive Sector Battle Clasp. He returned to Lowell and resumed his career. I can remember my grandfather not liking loud storms and noises. I remember he wore hearing aids. Back then they called it shell shock. I would imagine he suffered from PTSD. In 1919, in the midst of the Spanish flu pandemic, he was made city bacteriologist. It was a position that paid $1,000. He held that position until 1958, when his son took it over. He also served on the Board of Health and as school physician. They closed schools and had a mask mandate. Worldwide, 50 million people perished. He was at Lowell General Hospital for the better part of 50 years. He served in many capacities at the General. He was a staff physician, chief of pathology, and chief of staff. As his expertise grew, so did the many organizations that sought his help and guidance. Among the many causes he became associated with were the Public Health Committee, the Committee for Diphtheria Immunization, Red Cross, Polio Committee, and the State Civilian Defense Medical Office. He spoke to many organizations, helping them to become established. During World War II, in addition to all his other duties, Dr. Rodger served as medical consultant to the U.S. Selective Service Board. For his time and efforts, he received the Selective Service Medal for faithful and loyal service to the United States of America. In 1948, my grandfather had the distinction of being named to the nation's medical blue book, naming the top medical specialists. He was a founding fellow of the American College of Pathologists, a member and past president of the Middlesex North Medical Society, and an original diplomat of the American Board of Pathology. As a pathologist, he worked in a quiet atmosphere, which is one I think he liked. Outside of the hospital, he was a member and former president of the Lowell Exchange Club. He unselfishly served his community and improved the quality of life in Lowell. He served as a 32nd degree Mason in the William North Lodge. He was a member of Mount Pleasant and served on the City Golf Tournament Committee. He was married to my grandmother, Irene Walsh, for 55 years. She called him Papa. They had 3 children, among them their son, Dr. Robert Rodger, who himself became chief of pathology at St. Joseph's Hospital. They worked side by side. He had 8 grandchildren. He liked relaxing at his cottage in Ipswich. He liked lamb chops and maple walnut ice cream. He liked to read Ian Fleming. He passed away in 1972. My granddad followed the advice he heard at his 1910 graduation. He rose above his circumstances and surroundings. He was kind in words and deeds. In the war and in times of crisis, he would have been called a true hero. He worked and worked and worked some more. He loved his family, his profession, his city, his state, and his country. The Lowell High School community should be proud of his accomplishments and his lifelong commitment to the city. He is what a distinguished alumnus should be. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you very much. To introduce our next honoree, Aaron Morris. Aaron is the captain of the football team and a member of both the varsity indoor and outdoor track and field teams. Please welcome Aaron.
Dr. Titus Plomaritus, class of 1949, born and raised in Lowell, Titus was the third of 7 children born to Greek American immigrants. At the age of 17, Titus served his country as a U.S. Army trooper in the early post-World War II occupation of Japan. His senior year, Titus was elected class president and secured a prom date with his high school sweetheart, Claire Hebert, who later became his wife. Titus earned a football scholarship to Boston University and graduated in 1953. He then became Dr. Plomaritus, earning a Doctor of Chiropractic degree from the Chiropractic Institute in New York in 1957, and a Master of Science in Nutrition from the University of Bridgeport in 1979. He was a chiropractor for over 40 years. Dr. Plomaritus has always been heavily involved in the community, including providing over $10,000 annually in Lowell High School students' college scholarships through the Plomaritus Family Foundation. He served as LHS Boucher Club president from 1962 to 1963 and president of the Raymond E. Riddick Scholarship Fund in 1997. Titus and his late wife, Claire, have 4 children and 8 grandchildren. Please welcome to the podium Dr. Titus Plomaritus.
I was searching for the 7 tenors to find out when it started, and would you believe it started right here in this auditorium? I was sitting down in one of these rows during the freshman orientation, and I was disciplined for being disrespectful to the freshman orienter. Well, Mr. Sullivan, the headmaster, very nicely and fatherly took me aside and said, if you are disrespectful, you'll be disciplined. Today, there's 1 hour of detention after school. Well, that very first day of school, Mr. Sullivan was very effective in pointing me in the right direction going forward. My father came from Greece when he was 36 years of age. He brought with him the old country educational mentality. When a child turns 14, he's to get a job and help support the family. Well, being one of 7 children, I fell right into that category. I went to Mr. Sullivan, who I call my father away from home. I said, Mr. Sullivan, I'm leaving school. My father got me a job. He said, what? He sat me down. He picked up the telephone. He called the superintendent of schools, Vincent McCartan at that time. They put their heads together. Next thing I know, I'm sitting in a police car with the beacon flashing, going to my father's barbershop. My father only read the Greek newspaper and the Greek Bible. When the police car pulled up and they were pulling me in there with a uniformed policeman, my father moved behind the barber's chair. He got scared when they said, you were in violation. If you don't send Titus back to school, you're going to jail. Oh, he picked up the Greek Bible. He started mumbling. I think he even stained his trousers. He said in a broken English, he said, if Titus agrees to milk the cows and feed the chickens, he go back to school. Victory, Mr. Sullivan. Now, when I turned 17 years of age, I'm a junior in Lowell High School. Mr. Sullivan calls me in his office, and he says to me in another very fatherly manner, he said, Titus, there were 2 well-dressed U.S. Army recruiting officers there. He said, these gentlemen are here, and they're willing to give you the complete GI Bill of Rights and a free college education if you commit to serve 18 months in the U.S. Army. And that was to go to relieve the troops because World War II just ended. I said, that's a good idea, but I have to get my father to sign the papers. So I took the papers home, and I said to my father, I'm going in the Army. I need you to sign these papers. He looked at me. He said, I don't sign no papers. You don't go in the Army. You get a job, help out the family. I said, Pa, they're going to pay me $25 a month. I can sign it over to you. Oh, good idea. Where are those papers? Collectively, let me explain that I was very fortunate to have two Hall of Fame coaches, Coach Ray Riddick and Coach Stanley Starklosa. They were so instrumental in the development of my athletic skills, sportsmanship, leadership, and responsibilities. It was really very interesting that collectively, Headmaster Sullivan, Coach Starklosa, Coach Riddick were so instrumental in my creating the 7-tenant scholarship program. And in order to fund that program, I needed a source of funding. So I wrote a book. The book is named Titus. I went on a book speaking tour across the country at that time when the book first came out. And it seemed like every time I'd get in front of either a microphone or something, they would say to me, "Who is Titus?" So I'd tell them, I said, Titus was a chicken farmer when he was 12 years old. He was a United States Army paratrooper when he was 17. He was an all-scholastic football player. He was a football coach. He was a biology teacher. He was a professional photographer. He was a bank incorporator. He was a presidential confidant. He was a chiropractor. And a critic's quote, Titus outgumps Forrest. Before I sit down, I want to thank the Distinguished Alumni Nominating Committee. I'd like to thank my sponsors, Kay Fallon. Jimmy Fallon couldn't make it today. Paul Serpenant and my son, Dr. Titus Plomaritus Jr., sitting down here, and my deceased wife, Claire. You see, she was the driving force for over 65 years in the development of my reaching the pinnacle of excellence. And I'd like to thank her dearly for making this day the most memorable day of my life. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Titus. Great stories and great remarks. To introduce our next honoree, it's Miriam Syed. Miriam is the president of the senior class, a member of the Latin Lyceum, captain of the step team, and member of the varsity girls track and field team. Please welcome Miriam.
Dorothy Keville. Born and raised in South Lowell, Dorothy was the oldest of 6 children. Unable to afford college straight out of high school, Dorothy received her Master of Education in 1978 without earning an undergraduate degree. Dorothy's impressive career began in 1975 after raising 5 children and spanned over the course of decades. Positions she has held include Director of the Office of Litigation for the Massachusetts Department of Mental Health, the Health Policy Coordinator for the U.S. Department of Health 7 Human Services, Director of Government Affairs for the American Pharmacists Association, and Regional Government Affairs Manager for the Borough's Wellcome Company. A philanthropist and a change agent, Dorothy co-founded Africa Bridge, an HIV/AIDS project that serves aid orphans in Tanzania. In 2014, over 7,000 orphaned and vulnerable children received education and are being cared for by local families. At the age of 70, Dorothy shifted careers and has been a model and actress since 2010 with no signs of retirement in sight. She was the lead actor in Fish and Chips, a 40-minute independent film about Alzheimer's disease. Dorothy is an active member of the Lowell High School Reunion Committee and splits her time between Boston and St. Petersburg, Florida. Her 5 children all live in Massachusetts, along with her 12 grandchildren. May I present Ms. Dorothy Keville.
The last time I stood on the stage, 65 years ago, I was a clarinet player at the annual variety show. The curtain opened and the record player was blasting, "Old MacDonald Had a Farm." We all had unfamiliar instruments, so instead of a clarinet, I had a tuba. The audience laughed along with us while we made fun of ourselves. It's one of my favorite memories. After high school, I desperately wanted to go to college. I was offered a one-year scholarship, but my family couldn't pay for books or travel. So instead, I got a job at the Bedford VA Hospital as a medical secretary. I married, had 5 children, and occasionally audited university classes. I divorced at age 38 and was determined to finally continue my education. I found a master's program at Antioch University on Harvard's campus. They gave me 2 decades of volunteer work as a substitute for 4 years of undergraduate. What a gift. I attended class at night, and during the day, I worked full-time for the Massachusetts Department of Mental Health. Weekends were dedicated to my kids. Somewhere in there, I did homework. After graduation, I was chosen as a fellow at the Department of Health and Human Services in Washington, D.C. This clarinet player from Lowell reporting directly to the Secretary of HHS. That was in the early 80s when gay men were dying of what became known as HIV/AIDS. President Reagan refused to acknowledge the crisis. The only AIDS drug, AZT, cost $10,000 a year. Activists protested the lack of federal funds for AIDS treatment. They chained themselves to pharmaceutical companies, the buildings, and doused the executives with fake blood. Mainly because of some of the activists' trust in me, I went to work as a lobbyist for the company that made AZT. I saw a once-in-a-lifetime chance to make a difference. Success would require gaining trust on both sides. So I invited 18 groups of activists and 18 drug manufacturers to my office in DC. I was the only woman. So I worried. Would the activists chain me to my chair and douse me with fake blood? But we all got to know each other as people, and arm in arm, we approached Congress. We got $52 million the first year to pay for AIDS drugs. Funding is now $900 million annually. We proved that lives can be saved when people work together. This is just one of many public health initiatives I was fortunate to be a part of. I describe details in my recently published book titled AIDS Pandemic, The Untold Story. How ironic that this 83-year-old wrote about one pandemic in the middle of another. At the end of my book is a free guide called The Nuts and Bolts of Government: How to Affect Change at the Local, State, and National Levels. This guide is a roadmap for activism. It can encourage young people, anyone really, with determination that they too can make a difference. 50 books are on their way to Dr. Stephanie Salvaggio. I'm blessed, really, to be with you today, and this is where it all started. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. It was fabulous. To introduce our last honoree, Natalia Flores. Natalia is Vice President of the National Honor Society, Wing Commander of the Junior ROTC, and member of the varsity girls basketball team. Please welcome Natalia.
Stephen Conant, class of 1974. Stephen is a fourth-generation resident of Lowell and proudly graduated from Lowell High School in 1974. After high school, he received a bachelor's degree in environmental sciences and philosophy from the University of Massachusetts Lowell in 1979 and a master's degree in urban and environmental policy in 1984. Stephen's lifetime commitment was to improving environmental quality, community engagement, and making positive change for future generations. That commitment is demonstrated through 30 years of professional experience in energy, environmental protection, and community development. For over 20 years, his experience in the private sector has been primarily in the U.S. electric industry. Prior to that, he worked 12 years in the public sector as a local land use regulator, city planner, and community and stakeholder liaison, including serving as a district director for a U.S. congressman. Stephen was instrumental in Lowell's 2000 for 2000 tree planting effort. In 1989, he was presented with a LEAF Award for converting ideas into substance by the Massachusetts Community Forest Foundation. Due to this effort and Lowell's continued dedication to plant trees, the city has been recognized every year as a Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation. He served on the board of directors for the Andover School of Montessori from 2000 to 2004. In 1995, Stephen received the National Conservation Award from the Daughters of the American Revolution for the preservation of the Spalding House. And in 2008, he received the Bankers Volunteer Award for Lifetime Achievement. Please welcome to the stage, Mr. Stephen Conant.
Thank you very much, Maria, for that nice introduction. And thank you to the committee for this honor to be a distinguished alumni. It really is quite an honor. I also want to thank my daughter, Sarah, class of 2001, for nominating me. We spent a lot of time in the city, whitewater rafting and doing things like that. And I also want to thank my wife. We celebrate our 33rd wedding anniversary tomorrow. And she's been right next to me through all of the things that I've done here in this city. I'm humbled to be in the company of the people on this stage and the people who have been on this stage before. I am really just an average guy. I was not in the National Honor Society. I was just a regular person here at Lowell High School. And one of the organizations I founded here, which has really been my, I think, real contribution, is a group called the Lowell Parks and Conservation Trust. If any of you have ever been whitewater rafting or planted a tree in the city or maybe had some education programs through the trust, that was an organization that I co-founded 30 years ago. And it was something that really, that led to it. One of the things that bothered me as a kid and going through college, I studied environmental sciences at the University of Lowell, was that when you looked at a city, it was all gray. And I said, that's not right. The city isn't gray. It's not all concrete. There's a lot of green here. There's a lot that can be done in a city. So in founding the trust, one of the things we wanted to do is to recognize those things that are within the city that people were really overlooking for a long time. So the ability to go whitewater rafting, nobody knew the Concord River even existed. The Merrimack River, when I was young, when I was your age, at the close of Fridays, the mills would discharge their dye into the river, and it would flow red or it would flow blue. They didn't have the Duck Island sewage plant, so the Merrimack River was an open sewer. Now, we've changed all that. There's been a lot done with the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, but right now, we as a country, you as students, me, face a much greater challenge. So that's really what I want to emphasize today, is the problem of global warming. How many people know Greta Thunberg? Put your hands up. I know you can put your hands up because all the Honor Society people. I want you to keep your hands up if you think you're part of the solution. And I'm going to tell you to leave it there because you are. You live in a city. And unlike the gray that showed on those topographic maps, cities are a major part of the solution to our environmental problems. Let me repeat that. Cities are the major part of the solution to our environmental problems. When you live in a city, if you live in an apartment building or a condo building, it's not a suburban house that uses all this, you're much more efficient in the energy use. If you walk to school, if you took a bus, all things you can't do in the suburbs, the green suburbs where people go to be green and environmental. In the city, you are much more energy efficient. My daughter lives in New York City. She's much greener than friends of hers that live up in Vermont. It sounds funny, but it's not the case that cities are dirty. They are the solution, and be part of that. So you are already, by living here, part of that solution. Jimmy told me to be short, so I'm going to just give you 3 things before I go. First of all, do what I found. When I found that the Merrimack River was polluted, that the Concord River, nobody knew about it, look at things that you can do in your own backyard, how you can make a difference where you live. Look around at what's there. Secondly, stand up for what you believe in. There was a point in my career when they were building schools in this city, and Jimmy Campbell will chuckle when I say this because he's a fellow honoree, that the Lowell Parks and Conservation Trust actually resisted that. If you went to the Shaughnessy School or the Butler School, those schools are built on what were city parks. Now, there was this great, it was a Solomon's choice, parks or schools. The parks got the short end, but to the city's credit, we have come back and added more and more parks to the city, and we've really recognized what's available. But that means stand up for what you believe in. Greta Thunberg told the United Nations, "How dare you?" That's your generation. How dare you, 16 years old, told world leaders, you need to step up for what you believe in, because that's the only way we're going to make change. And finally, continue to be part of that solution. Be engaged in what you do. Patrick Mogan, we're here in Lowell High School. Patrick Mogan, the superintendent of schools, is probably the individual related to the Lowell school system that had the most impact on me. Patrick said, never underestimate the capacity that's within the average person to contribute to the common good. Average people, just a guy coming out of Lowell High School, you can make a huge difference. Just apply yourself. Don't think negative, think positive, think, what can I do to get over this? Be a change leader. Lowell is great for that. This city has enormous resources. I know you'll take advantage of them. And Lowell High School, in the middle of that, is one of the best resources you'll find. Look around at the people that you're sitting with today. You'll be here some point in the future because you're going to do great things. You're going to make a difference. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for the class of 2021 Distinguished Alumni.